Well, good day, everyone. This is Brad. How is everyone doing? I've been really lately been asked a very interesting question that actually made me really dig inside myself and think for me and look at my experience and how I could answer this question. So the question was, it's a simple question and it's a hard answer. And I think you'll find maybe within your life, if you have children, that it's a hard thing for you to answer as well. So the question was, how do I get my children involved in spirituality? And God, I was stumped for a minute. Of course, I have three children and they're older. And I was very fortunate that all three of them grew up in a place where they were allowed to experience and feel certain things for themselves, a place of nourishment. So I'm grateful they turned out great. They all have their own spiritual ways about them. And this isn't really the concept of church or ideologies, so to speak. And we're going to talk about church and ideologies as a real important factor as children grow. Because the basic thing that I found, and when I was thinking about this, is children are a sponge, particularly when they're young, to let's say that point to 7 years old. At that point, you've actually, excuse me, you've actually created something physiologically through marriage and procreation or lack of marriage. And to me, it doesn't matter either way. This is 2022, I guess. So if you guys love each other and having kids, and that's cool. But the children are sponges and they start picking things up. So what I found is that children tend to retract a little bit when things are thrown down their throats very, very in a hard way. So, children need that loving environment, that loving space, and that nourishment. And there's really no finer nourishment than spirituality in the mind and in the body and in the soul, our spirit, if you will. So we look at the idea of foundation. What is the foundation for you and your spirituality as an individual or as a couple or as, parents? What is your foundation, and how can you bring this spiritual concept to a child that really doesn't have any understanding about what you're talking about? One thing that children, I find, really gravitate to is happiness, good times. And I'm not talking about overindulgence. I'm talking about simple happiness and simple playful times. Because in that happiness and that playful time, you will get more bang for your buck than making them wake up Sunday morning, making them throw on the clothes, taking them to this place that they don't want to go to, they don't understand. And in some way, shape, or form, they're getting it thrown down their throat again. So spirituality is not a daily thing. Spirituality is an every moment thing. And the concept of prayer and the concept of talking to a supreme being, if you want to call it God or creative force or whatever you want to call it, it's a daily practice. It's something that you start as a habit with children in a playful way. So it's really nice to consider that in this process of spirituality, there's also the potentiality of learning to come with it. So children generally don't read when they're first starting to learn, and you read to them. So books are a beautiful, beautiful asset. Books that are a little funny, maybe, that have a loving overtone, that have that loving happiness to it. And that repetitiveness in reading about things and bringing it to their awareness in a picture state or colors or things of that nature are very, very helpful. When I grew up, I had a routine. And routine for children are very important. Structured routine. My mother was a stickler for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But every time we sat down, we learned a habit. And that habit was thankfulness. And in that thankfulness, it was prayer. Now, it doesn't matter who you call God or where you worship or whatever, but this is something that happens every day. Sitting at dinner and creating that habit that this is your family, this is dinners, and eating together is important. This is a place of real togetherness, getting rid of the cell phones, turning them off. You're at dinner, you're at lunch, you're at breakfast. What are we thankful for today? So children will start to learn that in their process. It will become a habit. Prayer becomes a habit. Or if you don't like the word prayer, thoughtfulness. So you could consider that all plant life, all animal life, everything that you consume is part of this creative force. I mean, your food is God itself. So if you're not in that state where you want to pray to some super being that you don't believe in, that's fine. But you're still partaking in a nurturing environment, nurturing food, and your thankfulness for the food and praying and thanking the food. So you're creating this habit. For me, my greatest thing was when I was a kid, my mother always tucked me in. Like, it's bedtime. This was a sacred time. This was a time where my father as well, they would both show me love during the day and nurturing environment and whatever. But going to sleep was just, of course, I was always tired and ready to go to sleep. But it was a time when they sat on the edge of my bed and tucked me in. And they told me that they loved me. They told me that there was something else that loved me. We prayed. I'm 58 years old. Did I just do that? Oh, shit. I'm 38 years old. No, whatever. Age doesn't matter. But we prayed together, and where I am today. Now I still say this childhood prayer that's like you found in a book that was, for a 3 or 4-year-old, but I still say this prayer. And in that prayer, we're thankful in that prayer, and we're thankful for the people and places and things around us. It's important not to shove this stuff down children's throats. They will eventually, most certainly, take to it. But as parents, we want this idea that we want them to take to it the way we want them to take to it. So I'll say to you, consider that might be a wrong thing. Now, when I first started to go to church, of course, I was born in the South in the Baptist Belt, but my parents were born in New York. So there was a culture thing, shock for my parents and us and whatever. But, through the years, that all changed for me. And I found that place that we call church is a place, or worship, is a place of community. It's a place of where we really see the love for community, the love of faith, and faith is really, really important. But as the child grows, what you want them to do might not be how they're experiencing it. So my mother, when I got into Boy Scouts, I started to have a love for nature. And I found for me that being outdoors and being in nature. And I would say to her, I said, but mommy, this is like a church to me. I feel the best when I'm outdoors, or when I'm hiking, or when I'm earning a merit badge, or things of this nature. So she was very comforting in the fact that she would always, and she called me bratty boy. She's a bratty boy wherever you find it. I'm happy that you're happy, right? So let them start to experience in it, and nudge them simply and easily in in a direction that you're comfortable with, but not pushing them into it. So much of what we see with the decline in numbers in churches and houses of worship is because when children get older and they get into their middle years, they've had it rammed down their throats so much that by the time they're a late teenager and in their 20s, they don't want any part of it anymore. They're like done with it. And interestingly enough, when you start getting into your 30s and 40s, you start trying to look for it again. And now, of course, everybody's starting to look for it again in different ways. And the world is full of beautiful, beautiful venues. There's really no right or wrong venue. There's really no right or wrong way to get or find the creative force. And each of us are individuals, and we all have needs, similar needs. Some of our needs are exactly the same, but other needs spiritually, we're all in a different place spiritually in our growth, right? So when children start to create these habits, and you as a parent start to help them create these habits, again, a loving environment, a happy environment, an environment of faith. What does faith look like to you? Is it just Sunday? Or is it the dogma of books and making them read these beautiful passages that even to this day are still being deliberated in schools and universities, and a still lack of understanding? The words of Scripture are beautiful, and they can bring those ideas and concepts to children, but they're really hard to grasp. So for me, my dad would take me out, and we would go down to the lake, or we would go fishing, and my dad would be, son, isn't it really beautiful here? Can you imagine how this was created? Can you imagine something of greatness made this for us? So you're giving them a simple concept or a simple idea, and you're offering to them this expansiveness in their mind for them to start to consider what it is. Because as humans, as people, even as adults, if we're told something, we're told it, and we think, oh well, we know what it is. Like, no, you know what it is when you experience it. There's a song that's Brooks and Dunn. It's a country singer, and it's called Red Dirt Road. And in the song, it's like he talks about finding Jesus on this red dirt road. And really cool song, but where do you find it? Where do you find that spirituality within yourself? So for me, as a child, it was out fishing. It was out being outdoors. For other children, it could be art. It could be canvas. It could be paints. It could be playing baseball. So everybody's like this thing, you got to go, to Sunday, you got to do Saturday night, or you got to go here and you got to go there. All of that is very, very important because it's our history and it's part of our culture and our foundation. But in today's day and age, we need to consider how to take children into this new concept or idea. Because we're in a global community now. We have culture everywhere. We have all these different books and all these different worship houses and all this, and we know where that's got us over the last millennium. It works, but it could be working better, right? I have friends from every corner of the world, no question about it. I have friends from every faith. that ever could be. I've studied with them. I've studied with people from India. I've studied with people from Tibet. I've even studied with people who consider themselves atheists. Like, I'm interested. What does that look like? What, it's not that that's what I feel, but to hear that idea or concept. And it was funny because we went through this. I went through this with one person, and this was a young person. This, not a child, but somebody in their teenage years that I worked with. And they said, well, I'm an atheist. And I said, well, okay, that's fine. Like, and the more we got into each other, and the more we worked together, and this person, this young boy, started to realize that he did believe in some things. And for a child, when they start to believe in things, when they start to learn the beauty of nature, and you start infusing the ideas or concepts that there's something greater or bigger happening here, that there's a force or a creation that, the sun, right? So photosynthesis, when a child starts to learn about photosynthesis, I mean, this is a really big understanding of how the creative force works. So you can start to infuse science in it. You can start to infuse ideologies in it. But as parents, you are inevitably, and this may be a big thing to say, you're responsible for it. You're responsible for it. So many of the people I teach, I see in my 20s, the 30s, 40s, and even 50s, and they're just starting to come to the idea or concept of spirituality. Like they've let it go for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And they're starting to feel that push that there's something bigger, there's something better. And when you talk to them, what the basic principle that I see is that there was some kind of family decline, lack of ritual in the house, lack of love in the house. So inevitably, listen, your parents, you want to teach your kids spirituality, you're going to get help from, your house of worship or where you go. You're going to hopefully get help from your public schools. No, sorry, you're not. You're going to get less help from your public schools, and they're going to start decommissioning their minds towards faith, because hey, if you don't believe me, that's fine. If you don't think so, there's parochial schools, there's other things happening, but in the public school venue, we know what's happening. But inevitably, you're responsible. Well, we don't have time for breakfast. You send your child to school. Did you write a little note in there? Like, you're sending them with food. They're getting into a lunchroom that's full of a lot of kids in chaos. And all of a sudden they pull out and there's a little note in there. Like, I love you, or have a beautiful day, or remember to look up at the sky, or isn't the sky beautiful today, or whatever. There's none of that happening. Dinner is not happening. Bedtime stories are not happening. I'm not saying all parents are like this, but I'm saying the more time you put in with your child, the more happiness and love and nourishment around spirituality. I know a very nice lady. She just had a baby a couple of years ago. She's on the West Coast, and I don't see her anymore. And she had to move, and I was, everybody seems to be moving to the West Coast. I don't know why. Oh, maybe they got a calling. And she's a yoga instructor. Her little child goes to the yoga studio. Like, she's nurturing this child. Yoga is a beautiful spiritual practice. It's one of the finest. You can do that. There's places called like Mommy and Me, right? There's places to go. Safe to swim. The beauty. Oh my God, you're swimming. How great. This whole interaction with the child and this nourishment is very, very important. And you don't have to, it's not going to happen right away, this spirituality thing. Because you want it to happen in a certain way. Let me tell you something. When a child's born, they're more spiritual at that moment than they're ever going to be in their life. And the moment they die, they're going to be the most spiritual they ever were in their life. The point of birth and the point of death. It's like, to me, that's like the baby is innocent and in pure creation without being taught anything. It's like, I have this clean slate. You, as a parent, get a clean slate. No, it's your responsibility. If you want spirituality, you can do it. There's a lot of great teachers out there. I'm certainly not the best teacher at this. The ideas and concepts that I gave you, or if you listen to this YouTube, will work. But you only get out what you put in. And I know there's a lot of troubled children out there that come into the world in a certain way we don't understand. And it makes it harder. But folks, this is your karma. Your child is your karma. What are you doing with it? What are you leaving here? When you leave, what did you leave here? If you can find a community, I've recently found a unity church, which is for me really, really special. Whatever church you find, whatever works, work it. In closing, I'd like to just maybe have you consider one suggestion. Wherever you find yourself in worship, it's absolutely critical to teach young children that all faiths are beautiful. They are. You can't put one faith against another faith. There's nothing wrong with being a Muslim or a Christian or a Buddhist. I've studied them all. I love them all. I love the Upanishads. I love Hinduism. I love it all. It's all inclusive. The world is an inclusive place. Teach them that all people are good people. And I promise you, we'll get to that world where we can all have cultures. We can all be different races. We can have all different beliefs, but yet we can all come together and say, we come from the same place. It's all good. So that got me a little, I kind of get a little sensitive now and again. There's a lot of sadness out there when I think about, children growing up in different parts of the world, and even in the United States, that, the Buddhists are terrible people, or Muslims are terrible people. They're not. It's just what they're taught and how they're taught, and children are taught that way. So step up to the plate, be a parent, accept your karma, and do the best you can do, and know that you're doing the best you can do. Don't beat yourself up. You got plenty of years with them. You got plenty of time. But if you're not doing it on a daily basis, it's not going to happen. I love all you guys. Check out my other YouTubes. Check out my website, bradfristensky.com. Send me some feedback, subscribe, share it. Love to hear from you. Until next time,